Okay, Be'ezras Hashem, as we come to the culmination, as we come to the edge, as we come to that place where so often it's difficult, it's hard to push forward. We've reached the limit. It's hard to push forward with Ratzon, with Chachma, with Bina, with all of the aspects of ourselves. The affirmative narratives that we've told ourselves about our worthiness and our capacity to be makusher to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to be makusher to the Tzaddikim, to be makusher to ourselves, very often falls into a place of speechlessness, into a place of stuttering, into a place of doubt, into a place of no longer necessarily valuing the inner strength that rests within us, because we feel that we have revealed the true, authentic self, which is failure, which is sin, which is transgression, which is being thrown away. And a person is faced coming into Rosh Hashanah, coming into that place where we've reached the limit and we're forced to go beyond the limit. A person has come to that place where the only thing left that I can do is cry out in a speechless cry that emerges out of the depths of the depths of the depths of the depths. Mima amakim, from the emek b'toicha emek, tahim el tahim kaira. The abysmal depths call upon further depths within the self. There's a depthlessness that knows no bounds within what we feel pulls us away from the Rabban Shlalem, but it's specifically from within that place of the limitless depths that we find the residual essence of that undying, undeniable, irreducible strength of hope that emerges from within our own most solitude, that allows us to cry out and attach ourselves to the Rabban Shlalem to reveal the newness that is inherent in every single moment. And there was nobody like Rabbi Nachman. There was nobody like Rabbi Nachman, who learned it from his great-grandfather, who learned it from David Malka Mashiach, who's going to teach this Torah to Mashiach Tzidkenu. There was nobody like Rabbi Nachman ben Fega, Rabbi Nachman ben Simcha, who taught us how to find chayas, how to find vitality, how to find the power to move forward, even when there's no more power to move forward. And it was Rabbi Nachman who teaches us very simply that the simple secret of tshuva is to recognize that the biggest rachmanus in the entire world, the biggest source of compassion, something that demands empathy, a pathos, a pathetic situation that demands the utmost empathy, is when a yid falls. Because when a yid knows where they've come from, when we know where we're taken from, then there's no greater punishment than richuk itself. We don't have to be afraid of the punishments for the richuk. The richuk is the punishment, and we are in Gehenna already when we feel that richuk. And it's specifically the eitzos pshutos of Rabbi Nachman ben Fega who came along to reveal to us how to pull ourselves out, and reveal the hope that exists after the hopelessness, the power that exists after the powerlessness, the beginning that exists after the end, the joy that exists when joy has fallen away, that still small voice of the shofar that cries out of the depths of speechlessness. It's specifically Rabbi Nachman ben Fega who came to teach us Yesh inyan sheyitapecha kol letova. There is something, and it's a simple perspective that transforms everything from one perspective into another, and that's the perspective of Mashiach Tzidkenu. It's the Das Elion. It's the Da. It's when Rabbi Nachman introduces his Torahs of Da. Know deeply, because you know this already. It is the most intuitive truth that rests at the cornerstone of your soul. But Rabbi Nachman came along to be the mouthpiece, to be the shofar, as Rabbi Nassim describes in the Hakdama to Likutei Moharan, to be the shofar that allows us to verbalize all of those unspoken cries that we feel, to find ourselves within the Torah of the Tzaddik, to find ourselves at the cusp of hopelessness, to find ourselves at the cusp of not knowing how we're going to introduce the new year. If the previous year has been such a struggle, how are we going to do it? Comes along Rabbi Nachman, and he gives us so much insight, so much eitzah as to how to move forward. What I want to focus on right now is a few teachings from Rabbi Nachman. As we get closer and closer to Rosh Hashanah, the Das Elion tells us to be makasher ourselves to the tzaddikim who know how to be malamed zchus on ourselves, to be makasher ourselves to the tzaddik who said, Rosh Hashanah is mine, my entire thing is Rosh Hashanah. It was Rabbi Nachman ben Fega. And Rabbi Nachman says as follows, in the famous letter, in the Igeris of Rabbi Nachman to all of his chassidim from one generation to the other, and anybody who even knows Rabbi Nachman's name, anybody who knows that there was a tzaddik named Rabbi Nachman, anybody who knows the struggle to fight against hopelessness and to force ourselves into a space of hope and faith, that's a chassid of Rabbi Nachman. That's what it means that a person is a Breslover. Basof, says Rabbi Nachman, everyone is going to be a Breslover. It doesn't mean that everybody is going to know who Rabbi Nachman was, or what Likutei Moharan is, or what Likutei Halachos is, or what Likutei Atfilos is, or what Sichos Haran or Chaim Maharan, or all of the Heilige Svarim, or the Sipurei Maisios, or Likutei Tfilos. It doesn't mean each person is going to know what these books are, but it means that every Yid is going to understand what it means to survive from the pits of hopelessness, what it means to move forward out of the stuckness of the self, what it means to grab hold of the last vestiges of hope that exists beyond any possibility of their existence, to tap into that hope that exists, even its own destruction, the hope at the heart of hopelessness. It's Rabbi Nachman who gives us this eitzah. And Rabbi Nachman writes as follows: when a person enters into Avodas Hashem, when a person enters into the attempt to be Makasher to Hashem, the path that appears in front of them appears to be one that distances them from God. The path appears to be one that pushes me away. The path is unavailable to me. And it appears to the individual that they are pushing him away from above, that Hashem doesn't even want me. And there is no allowance given to the individual to enter in to the space of Avodas Hashem. Ube'emes, and in truth, koil ha'israchkus, all of this distancing, hurak kulo hiskarvus, any ounce of distance that a person feels in their lives is in truth simply a gesture towards moving close. It's a call to move closer. And a person needs to encounter a tremendous element of strengthening within themselves so that they do not fall in their own minds, chas v'shalom. When a person realizes that I have put in so much effort year in, year out, month in, month out, day in, day out, that a person expends themselves and puts in every ounce of effort of their mind in our limited states to serve God, and a person is still going to feel as far as they felt in the beginning. And a person has not even begun yet to enter into the gates of Kedusha. Why? Because the person realizes that I am still full, I am still saturated with these vagrant thoughts and these thoughts that drag me away from the Rabbeinu Shleilim, and these physicalized aspects of myself and these confusing aspects of myself and this uncertainty. And anything that a person wants to do in Avodas Hashem, any movement forward that a person wants to engage in, any belief that a person wants to give themselves that it is me who can bring Mashiach, that it is me who is shaykh to Mashiach, that it is me who is shaykh to the Tzaddikim, that it is me who is shaykh to the Rabbeinu Shleilim. Every ounce of effort we put in, we're reminded once again that we're pushed away. We feel pushed out. We feel forgotten. Ein manichano, so there's no permission given. Ein Hashem yisparach mistakel alav klal, and it appears to an individual. It appears to an individual that the Rabbeinu Shleilim is not paying attention to them whatsoever, that they're forgotten by the Rabbeinu Shleilim, whether it's because they've done things that cause them to be deserved to be forgotten, or whether it's because the individual feels that they've never done enough to be remembered. Nevertheless, either way, a person feels forgotten by the Rabbeinu Shleilim. Ve'ein roitze klal ba'avodaso, and it appears that there is no desire for their activity and their holiness as a result of their struggles. Because after so long of screaming out each and every time and crying out to God and falling at the feet of God kavyachol to desire His help in our avodah, nevertheless, afal pikein adayin hu rachoik ma'od ma'od, a person feels farther and farther. Al kein nidmaloi ki'ilu ein Hashem yisbarach mistakel alav klal ve'in point of alav klal. Therefore, it appears in the individual's mind that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not looking at them whatsoever, is not turning Himself to their call. God forbid. It appears that God does not want us. It appears that the world does not want us. It appears that we are unable of wanting ourselves. Whether it's these emotional feelings of our spiritual distance from God or any other symptom that we might experience in this world, a person needs to strengthen themselves. A person needs to draw upon a fountain of infinite growth that exists at the core of the self, beyond the self-recognition. To strengthen oneself with intense strength. A doubled language of ma'od. A doubled language of ma'od. It's not enough that we have great strength. We need even more strength than great strength. We need a great, great strength. To not pay attention to the failures, to not pay attention to the struggle, to not pay attention to the yayush, to ignore the negativity, to ignore the negative voices in our minds that tell us we're unworthy. Because in truth, In the depths of truth, kol ha'ezrachkus hurak kulo hiskarvus, any aspect of distancing, any encounter with something that makes me feel like I'm far from the Rebbeinu Shalom is simply there in order to help me understand the secret of closeness and proximity to the Rebbeinu Shalom. V'chol hanar avar al kol tzaddikim. And Rabbi Nachman continues to say, he says, not only am I giving you this insight, but how do I know this insight? It's one thing to hear insight from a tzaddik. It's one thing to hear that everything is going to be okay. But to hear it from somebody who has always felt okay, to hear it from somebody who has never struggled in their lives doesn't give much koyach. What Rabbi Nachman is adding here is that there's a certain autobiographical expression that Rabbi Nachman is a neshama that's so big, like the neshamos of all of the Tzaddikim Hadoros of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh and the Arizal and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and Moshe Rabbeinu, that all of us find ourselves in them and they find ourselves in all of us. That we've heard from their mouths, Kasher Shamanu Mipihem Beferish, we've heard it explicitly out of their mouths, Shenid Melahem Shashem Yisbarach Ein Mistakel Upain Aleim Klal, that it appeared to them also that HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't pay any attention to them whatsoever. It appeared to them also that they were completely devoid of spiritual connectivity. Because it appears for so long that they've been putting in all of this effort and doing everything they needed to do in the service of God, and they still find themselves removed, distance upon distance, darkness upon darkness, concealment upon concealment. And if these tzaddikim, if these heilige tzaddikim had actually paid attention to the feelings of their heart, had actually paid attention to the feeling of his charkus, have actually paid attention to the thought that I have done something unforgivable, that I've done something that pushes me away from the Rebbeinu Shalom, that I've put myself into a position where I'm no longer makusher to the Rebbeinu Shalom, that I've lost the spiritual intensity that I felt a moment ago, that I've done something unforgivable. Anytime a person feels these things, these tzaddikim felt it also, and had they paid attention to these thoughts, they would not have moved along. They would not have become the tzaddikim that they were. The reason that they are tzaddikim is because they understood the secret of getting up each and every time, and to ignore the fact that there's any voice in this world that tells a person that they're meruchik from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Again, responsibility, accountability, all of those things continue to exist, but there is nothing in this world, nothing in existence that can be merachik a person from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And any thought of hisrachkus from the Rebbeinu Shalom, any thought of disconnection from the Rebbeinu Shalom is a kfiridika thought, and a person has to ignore it. We have to be koifer in the kfiridika thoughts about ourselves, and we have to be machazik ourselves, because if those tzaddikim had not been machazik themselves and had spent too much time paying attention to those self-defeating thoughts about how big of a failure we are at the end of the year when we're falling and we're acting like this at a time like this, Rabbi Nachman says, if you pay attention to those voices, then those voices will swallow you. V'haklal, and the general principle is, Ahuvi achi, my beloved brother, chazak v'ametz ma'od, strengthen yourself with a tremendous amount of courage to face down what feels so difficult. And gird yourself with every ounce of your strength, from your toes to your ankles to your feet to the lower half of the body, to the stomach, to the chest, to the arms, to the neck, to the mouth, to the nose, to the eyes, to the ears, to the head. Every ounce of a person's self has to be ne'echaz b'koyach. You have to grab yourself with intensity. Do what needs to be done. Engage in avodas Hashem. Connect to the Rebbeinu Shalom. And ignore any thought that is telling you anything otherwise. And if you're profoundly far from the Rebbeinu Shalom, then it appears to you in your mind's eye and your most spiritual sensibilities that you're farthering and distancing yourself from the Rabbi Shalom. Im kol zeh keneged zeh teda. Nevertheless, even if all of that is true, you should know deeply. She'ish kazeh, a person like this, shehu magushem kol kach, that's so physical and so fallen into the territory of this worldliness. Kol tenua v'tenua shehu menat tek atzmei ma'at min hagashmius poinel Hashem yisparach hu gedoyle v'yikra ma'od v'od. Kol tenua v'tenua, every movement, each and every movement that a person extricates extricates themselves ever so slightly out of the thickness and the stuckness that they find themselves in, and they turn themselves ever so slightly to God, in that moment we are performing the greatest kavod to the Rabbanu Shlalem. This is the most valuable form of avodah. Afilu nekuda ketana me'od, even the smallest, most irreducible nekuda tova that continues to exist in that dark place of the self, every slight movement away, that a person tries to lift themselves ever so slightly out of their physicality to connect to God, who rats kama v'kama alpayim persaus ba'olam misilyonim. The slightest gesture to move ever so slightly forward out of the thick stuckness that we find ourselves in all matters of stuckness, is miles and miles and miles, thousands of miles of spiritual growth. Kasher tavin heitiv, as a person has to understand. For this, a person should find a profound amount of joy, and they should gird themselves with simcha, ki atzvus mazik ma'oid ma'oid, because atzvus is going to destroy a person. Sadness over my spiritual condition, over my struggle, is a counterintuitive gesture of digging myself even deeper. I need to connect myself to the good within me and ignore the bad. The bad will fall away, it will be taken over. Immediately when a person wants to enter into the service of God, as tekef hu avodah gedolah k'sheish atzvus. It's a tremendous avera to be sad. A person cannot allow them to be sad because sadness comes from the other side and it's what drags a person down. And a person needs to be profoundly courageous and stubborn in their work and their service of God, to not allow themselves to give up even 1 inch of their standing, even the little tiny bit that we allow ourselves to do, even if we've gone through what we've gone through. We have to understand and remember this. You will need this. Each and every person needs this when they begin in their service of God, to remember the good and to forget the bad, to see the good as essential and the bad as inessential, to remember that I'm chelek and and that I have a shaykhus to the or of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like the biggest tzaddik to have ever lived, that I have a chelik in Moshe and me, and I have a chein miyuchad, and I have something that I can think about in the kol of the shofar and the light of Shabbos that no other yid in the history of the world has been able to connect to, and I can pull myself out. I can grab myself and pull myself out, because I will need this. Ki tzarich akshanas gadol ma'oid ma'oid. A person needs a tremendous amount of stubbornness and brazenness in the face of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in terms of coming close to him. Lios chazak v'ametz, to have courage, to be strong, to strengthen ourselves. La'achos atzmo, to grab oneself. La'amar al amdo, to stand sturdily, steadfast in that place of spiritual connectivity, even though we feel like all of the waters of the world are dragging us away. Afim mapilano, so even if I fall chas v'sholem b'chol pam, each and every time, because there are going to be times where a person is thrown away from the Rabban Shlalem. Afal pikein alav la'asayis shalo. All we have is our bechira. The idea what happens as a result of my bechira is not up to me. All I have is my avodah of bechira, la'asos ma'sheyachol ba'avodas Hashem, what I should do and what I can do in the service of God. Va'al yaniach atzmo lipo legamrei, and I should never ever allow myself to lose hope completely. Chas v'shalom. Ki kol elu hanafilos v'hayaridos v'habilbulim, because all of these falls and these degradations and these confusions, kiyotza bazeh, tzrichim behechrich la'avor behem kodim shenichnasim la'avodas v'sharia kedusha. It is fundamental to go through all of these processes prior to entering into the gates of kedusha. V'gam hatzadikim ha'amitim avru b'chol zeh, and the ikr or of the true tzaddikim is that they were able to do this as well. V'da, and a person has to know, and this is fundamental towards the end of the year, to the death of the year, when we face Rosh HaShana and we feel ourselves meruchak betachlis arichak, v'da sheish echad shekvar hu eitz ala pesach shel kedusha, and a person has to know that there's someone who might be right next to the gates of kedusha, v'hu choyzer la'achirav machmas habulbulim, but they retreat backwards as a result of these confusions or these feelings of distance. Osha azai kishu samach eitz ala pesach, when a person is so close to the entrance, so close to the opening of the gate, az miskaber alav hasitra achur baladavar ma'oid ma'oid. At that point, the negative side and the negative thoughts and the negative parts of myself are going to strengthen themselves, Rahman al-Litzlan, biskabris gadol v'neirim ma'oid ma'oid, to push me farther and farther away, Rahman al-Litzlan, ve'in manichan osalichanis b'seicha pesach, and and they don't allow a person to enter into the Pesach of Kedusha, into that beginning again. And as a result of that, a person moves backwards and retreats. Because this is the way of the Sitra Achra, that when it sees a person who's close mamish to entering into the gates of Kedusha, when a person is almost ready to enter in, it's specifically at that point that it strengthens itself. At the end of the year, Rahman al-Itzlan, Al-Kain Sarach Az, his Chaskas Gadol Me'oid, a person needs to strengthen themselves. A person needs to over intensify that strength in pushing forward. The Shamanu made Tzadike Emes Sha'amar. And we've heard in the name of Heligat Tzaddikim, we've heard in the name of the true Tzaddikim, She'ilu lo haya omer le'echad. If there was nobody in their lives, if there was somebody in their lives who had said to them, Yihi mishi, whoever it was, be'ez sha'asak ba'avodasa Hashem b'tchilaso, in the beginning of their service of God, Achi, Chazak ve'echoiz atzmecha, strengthen yourself, be strong. Hayiti ratzu mezariz ma'od v'avodas Hashem. The tzaddikim said, had they heard this, they would have broken through all the barriers. Kigam alav avar kol hanal. Because all of the tzaddikim go through this. But alas, the tzaddikim didn't hear this. Al kain misha writes Hashem. A person wants to enter into the gates of service. Yizkor zois heitiv. They should remember this. Chazak atzmecha ma'oid. Strengthen yourself. Va'aseh masha tuchal ba'avodas Hashem, and do what you can in avodas Hashem. Uberabos hayamim v'hashanim tichanus levetach be'ezrasi yisparach l'toich sharei hakdusha. And without a doubt, with the help of God, a person is going to enter into the gates of Kedusha. Ki Hashem yisbarach malei rachamim v'roitza ba'avodas ma'od. The Rabbi Shalom wants us, and we have to ignore any thought that tells us otherwise. We have to ignore any action that says otherwise. We have to ignore any intention or any feeling that implies otherwise. What we want is Hashem, and Hashem wants us, Be'ezras Hashem. Vida, and a person has to know, Shekol ha'tenuos v'ha'atakot, any movement or extension of oneself or removal of oneself. Even the slightest gesture that a person extricates themselves out of their stuckness, ever so slightly, ever so briefly, for the service of God. Each and every gesture of strength, each and every gesture of hope, each and every gesture of the denial of hopelessness is valuable, and it gathers together and it comes to help the individual. When I find myself in dire straits, a person has to understand a person needs to push themselves forward. A person needs to go in this world on a gesher tsar ma'od. A gesher is a bridge that separates one side of something from the other side of something, and there's an abysmal depth in between, which says that there is no traversing, there is no moving over to the other side, but that bridge is there, that very delicate bridge of hope, that endlessness of hope, that irreducible nature of hope, the hopelessness of hopelessness, where we come to understand that there is an irreducible expression of hope that exists no matter what. That is what traverses us beyond from one edge to the other. It's the voice of the shofar, without speaking, without uttering anything, without knowing, without trying to know, without hoping, without anything other than simply being and abiding to the deep breath that is emergent out of the depth of the self. And Tahoim el Tahoim Kaira, the depth of the self cries out to the depths above, and at that point the person opens their eyes after the Kol HaShofar, and they find themselves on the other side. They find themselves capable of beginning again, finding new good points, realizing that there's a Leida Chadasha, there is a new birth that is available at every moment. That's the secret of Rosh HaShana. Rosh HaShana is that there's no end, Ein Sof. There's nothing that can possibly happen to a person in this world which says you have lost your ability to reconnect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this moment. Even the biggest sin in the world, even the biggest hate in the world, even the biggest kfira in the world stands absolutely weak and nullified in the face of one her tshuva, of one belief in the self, one denial of those self-denying thoughts. And at that point, the person realizes that I am Hashem, I am with Hashem, and Hashem is with me. Ani l'doidi v'doidi li. And at that point, the person is able to be makasha themselves to the tzaddikim amitim asher ba'aretz heim avadir kol chafzei bam, and the tzaddikim amitim in each and every generation to be carried in their hearts, to move ever so slightly forward beyond the intraversible and unreachable space We have to connect ourselves to move forward beyond what we feel we're able to move forward to connect ourselves, to lodge ourselves in the hope beyond hope, to believe that with Rosh HaShana, everything changes. With the Kol of the Shofar, everything changes. And there's nothing that pulls me away, and there's nothing that holds me down. And I am a Chiddush that has never been. Chidush kamoni lo haya me'olam. Like Rabbi Nachman said about himself, so too we say about ourselves. And this is where the Nechama comes from. The Nechama comes from realizing that every negative thought, every negative feeling, yes, we have to deal with it. Yes, we have to address it. Yeah, we have to engage it and fix it. But nevertheless, it says absolutely nothing about how close I am to the Rabbanu Shalom in this moment. Al chet shachatanu lefanecha, as Rabbi Nachman says, Rabbanu Shalom, if I sinned in front of you, then you were with me at that very moment, because I am nothing but an expression of your koach within me that gives birth to my actions. And Mamela, if I struggle, you're the one who gives me koach to struggle. Mamela, I'm not far from you. I'm never far from you, Rabbanu Shalom. I'm always with you. I'm always close to you. Ein on milvado, whether it's here, whether it's there, whether it's up, whether it's down, whether it's Asek Shamayim, Sham Heina, Va'atziga Sha'ol, Enecha, I find you above, I find you below, I find you there, I find you here, I find you nowhere, I find you everywhere, I find you inside, I find you outside, I find you in the shofar, outside of the shofar, in the siddur, outside of the siddur, in the boredom, in the excitement, in every expression of the self. Every breath that a person takes in this world is a Bria Chadasha. Every breath is a Chiddush Gadol, as Rabbi Nachman says. And a person has to believe that if you believe that your actions have the capacity to destroy, then not only in the next moment, but in the very same moment. When I recognize that I can fix myself, even though I am broken right now, even though I am in the process of breaking, nevertheless, there's a simcha gedola she'ein shum eitzav acharav. There is a profound joy that emerges upon a person when they come to terms with the realization that there is nothing that I can do to push the Rabbanu Shalom away from me. Nothing. I can try my entire life, but I will always end up in the very same place of Emunah, of the light of Emunah, of the light of Malchus, of the light of Shofar, of the light of newness, of the light of beginningness, of the secret of Chidush Kamoni Lo Haya Me'olam, that a person can restart every single moment over and over and over and over again, 1,000 times a day, moving upwards, 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 never stopping, closing the eyes and realizing that there's an infinite level of growth that I have within me, and that there is an infinite level of strength that I have within me, and there is an infinite level of hope that I have within me, and there is nothing that I can possibly do that can extinguish my ability to find the Rabbanu Shalom right in front of me, ayin ba'ayin, in this moment. That is the secret of Rosh HaShana. Specifically at the death of the year, there's no time for the Chalal HaPanui. There's no time to enter into the vacant space that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to create in order to create the world. We're going yashar ad ein sof. We're going directly to the infinite light that is without end. There is no end to the neshama of a yid. The neshama of a yid is able to be mechadesh themselves in one gesture of the eye, one tenua of the eye, one hear her tshuva, afilu kol shehu, is enough to be mahapich a person from a Rasha Gamor into a Tzaddik Gamor. It's enough to tear asunder all of the books of Misa, which can't even be written on Shabbos, and only to enter into the book of Chaim. And Be'ezras Hashem, with the help of the Tzaddikim ha'amitim in our generation, from previous generations, to be makusha to the tzaddikim of Rosh HaShana, to be makusha to this undeniable, undying hope, this irreducible hope of rectification, tikkun, fixing. That's all that there is. There's only fixing, there's only growing, there's only building. And when a person realizes this, every gesture of spiritual focus that I give, every gesture of strength that I put in this world, is the biggest nace. It's as big a nace as Bria Sa'ilam, because each person is a world. And anytime I recreate my world, or I renew my world, and I give birth to something new, I'm being Megala a Chidush Kamoni Lo Haya Me'olam. Chidush Kamoni Lo Haya Me'olam. Every ounce of moment, every moment in this world is a Chidush. And Be'ezras Hashem, with the koyach of Ischadshus, with the koyach of Emunah, with the koyach of denying the possibility of Yeush, we come closer and closer to the Tachlis Amiti, which is to be makasher ourselves to the Rabbanu Shalom wherever we find ourselves, to find the Nekudos Tovos that exist anywhere, and to uncover the Tachlis of the Tachlis, which is for our Kadosh Baruch Hu to be Megalas Rachamim Rabim, and for the entire world to come and understand Ki Yadea Kol Pa'ul, Ki Atape Al Tolya V'Yavin Kol Yitzur, Ki Ati Yatzarta V'Yamar Kol Asher Neshama Ba'apa Hashem Elokei Yisrael Melech. that we come to realize that every aspect of existence is equally close to the Rabbi Shalom, because Einod Milvado Ksiv, and Be'ezras Hashem we should be zoiche to a chsiva v'chsima toiva and a good keben shtior, and we should be zoiche to be mechadesh ourselves over and over. Every moment of Rosh HaShana is a new moment of hischadshus, and if I deviated from this kashrus in my mind to the tzaddikim, to the Rabbi Shalom for a moment, that's not a cause for yesh, it's a cause for renewing myself in the next moment. And Be'ezras Hashem we become Jews of beginning. We become Jews who begin again, each and every time. We get up, and the falling is there just to enable us to understand the secret of the Chiddush itself, of Chiddush Kamoni Lo Haya Me'olam, that my Gans Inyan is Rosh Hashanah, to be Machadesh everything, and to be Zoicha, to be Mekashet, Tzaddikim Amitim, and to be written in the book of the good life, Be'ezras Hashem.